In this video, I want to quickly show you how you can use the cache update functions in Apollo client to update the global cache. What I have here is a load thread component, which is basically responsible for loading all the messages for a particular thread. This is the basic definition of the message. What we have here is the ID, the text, and also a parent message ID, which is responsible for creating the threading of the message. Here I have a very simple list thread query to list out all the messages in a thread. What this query is basically doing is it is listing out all the messages where a particular parent message ID is set. The list query is going to return the fragment on the user message output. The fragment is defined as this. So we are pulling ID, text, created at, updated at, and some information regarding the sender on this fragment. And I'm using that fragment as my output in the list thread query. So that was a background about what this load thread component is doing. So let's look at the implementation of the load thread. So once we are into the load thread component, what we are doing here is we are using the use list thread test query, which we defined previously here, and we are passing in the parent message ID, which we are getting as a prop, and this is going to return us the data, the loading, and other standard functions, query functions that you get with the Apollo client. Next, what I'm doing in the component is I'm simply mapping out the messages that I'm getting as a response in a list. Then I have few buttons for the demo, which are responsible for doing update on the cache and also updating the fragment. If we look at the running demo of this example, you can clearly see that the messages are loaded on the left side for one parent ID and on the right hand side for the another parent ID. And also for the demo purposes, I have two buttons attached which are responsible for updating the cache and also for updating the fragment. For the purpose of the demo, I want to showcase how you can use cache update functionality of the Apollo client to update changes in the global cache rather than the locally scoped cache. Therefore, for the purpose of this demo, what we will do is we are going to do cross-component cache updates. So whenever I click on update cache here, it should update the list on the right. Look closely. See how this component is actually doing a cross-component update of the cache. And if I click on the update fragment, this will again update the messages on a cross-component update. Now let's see in the code how all this is working out. If I look at the handle update cache functionality, what I'm doing here is I'm using client.read query and I'm passing in the query definition, which I have in a const variable. This is my original query definition. And then I'm passing in the variable parameters against which I want Apollo to match and return the particular query or the cache. So here I'm passing the parent message ID of the another component, which I'm using in the other component on the right hand side. This call to read query does not incur any network requests. So it will return me the thread data from the cache if it is there, if it is already loaded. If it is not loaded, it is going to return me an empty value. So if I have the thread data, then I will compose a fake data, like a mocked out version of my user message output, because that is what I am using as output in the query. And then I will use the client.write query. I will specify my query, original query definition, and the data, which is the list data. Once I have the mocked in data, then I will use client.write query to write out my changed data. So this way we are able to change the global cache of any query from anywhere using the Apollo client. The another change I want to demo is how do we update any fragment which is used anywhere in the entire application. So I have a list thread fragment here, which we were previously using for listing out the messages. Again, I have a fragment on user message output here, which we were using in our list call. What I want to demo here is, let's say if you have this fragment reused in your application multiple times and in multiple queries, it might become very cumbersome to look for individual queries which are using your fragment and then update those queries one by one in your code. What you can do instead is you can update a specific fragment at one place in your code, and the update will be reflected in all the queries which are using it and in all the components which are using that particular fragments. To achieve this, what I'm doing here is, like, you pass in the fragment ID, which is nothing but the ID of the message. Before we update fragments, we should inform Apollo about the key which it should use for caching in the data in its global cache. The way to do that is, in your configuration for the Apollo client, when you're specifying the cache definition, you need to specify the data ID from object definition. So what I'm doing here is I'm specifying to Apollo that with every object that you're storing in your cache, there will be an .id field associated with it, which basically you can use for keying in your cache. Okay, once that is said, what you need to do is you can use the client.read fragment. You need to specify the definition of your fragment, which is again coming from a const variable where I've specified the definition of my fragment. And then you need to specify the ID, which is your fragment ID. In this case, it will be the message.id itself. Once you have the current fragment, you can use client.write fragment, specify the ID for the fragment definition again, and the data and the updated thing that you want to update. You need to specify all the attributes. That is why I'm doing this unfurling of the previous object what we have in the cache, and then I'm specifying the new updated text. One thing I want to specify that none of these write query and write fragments have a network side effects. These functions are going to only update your global cache, and these are not going to have any side effects on your network call. If you want to persist your changes, you should call your mutations. So if we look at the demo again, and if we look at our update cache and update fragment functionality, for the update cache, I'm passing in the parent message ID of my list on the right hand side. So if I click on this, it should add fake messages in my global cache, which is attached with this particular list. Similarly, if I click on update fragment, it should update the message, the first message here, because I'm passing in the ID for this particular message. In this video, I just wanted to demo the support for updating the global cache. But if you want to do optimistic updates, you should use your mutations. The mutations come with options to do optimistic updates, which is more handy. Another support that Apollo has for updating the cache is every query returns update query function, which you can use to update local cache for that particular query in that component. So if I call the update query function in this particular component, it is only going to update the cache for this particular query that is used in this component. That's all for this video. If you have any questions, do let me know in the comments below.